Hey there, TouchDesigner developers. This is DiLaura here for the Interactive and Immersive HQ, coming at you with a new technique that I'm calling 2D texture slicing. So what the heck is 2D texture slicing? Well, you can take any top texture, for example, like this beautiful title card that I've generated for us here, and we can slice that up into a bunch of different components and have those kind of loop around our screen. We're not limited to just slicing in one direction. We can actually switch that to slice horizontally, but you'll see that it is an effect that sort of builds on itself. So we get those original vertical slices have now been continued to be sliced in the horizontal direction, and we can actually continue slicing over and over and over and over until we get this super glitchy, kind of interesting visual effect. What's cool about this is that it's a non-destructive effect, so you can see that my video feed is still coming through on this image here, so we can actually work with moving images and static ones. Finally, let's say you want more sort of variety to the pattern that is slicing up your image. You can hit a button and regenerate the seed, the random seed that generates the slicing pattern. So you can get all kinds of different variety from messing with that. So we can look at really quick just a couple more applications of this to different textures. Here's an example with video. You can see how, again, the video is still playing. We're getting some really interesting kind of glitched out visual effects, but we still get that moving image, which is awesome. And finally, we might as well try it with this as well. And you can see we can build ourselves a very interesting little modern art composition of a million different Elbers. So with that, let's jump into building this network and see how we can put this together. All right, so starting with a blank network here, let's go ahead and drop in a constant chop, which we're going to use to set our resolution for several of our operators in this network. We'll change that channel name to res, and we'll set our value here to 1280. We're going to use a square resolution just because it's easier in this case. However, you could use whatever resolution you want. And we're going to limit it to 1280 just so that anyone without the commercial or pro license can also follow along here. We'll follow that up with two ramp chops, or tops rather, and we're going to use these to create a little UV generator, kind of similar to some of the stuff Paqueta 12 has done. So in the second ramp, we're going to set our type to vertical, and then we're going to go ahead and select both of these ramps together and come to the common page and set our resolution from that constant chop we just set up. So we're going to drag that over to the title and hit chop reference, and we'll have 1280 by 1280 for both of those, which is great. We're going to set our pixel format here to 32-bit float mono, not RGB, but mono. And then that is actually everything that we're going to do for those two operators. We'll follow those up with a reorder top, and we'll connect the first ramp to the first input and the second ramp to the second input. And then within that, we will change the output green input to input number 2. And then we'll set our output blue channel to 0. And we'll come to the common page after that and set our pixel format to 32-bit float. And there we should see a nice generated UV for us. We'll attach a null to that, and then this UV texture is actually what we're going to be running into a feedback loop with displacement to give us that slicing technique. So we're not actually slicing the image itself, but we're slicing up this UV, which is what allows us to kind of modify those textures later on. So let's attach a feedback top to start up our feedback network, and then we'll grab a keyboard in chop as well to allow us to reset that easily. And then we'll come in here and make a chop reference from that keyboard in chop to the reset parameter and to the pulse parameter, because why not? As I just said, this is a displacement based effect, at least for this UV portion. So we're going to need our handy dandy displace top, and we'll drag that way over here to the right somewhere, because we're going to build a network that generates those patterns before we even touch the displace. So we're just going to leave that over there for now, and we'll start working on those pattern generators. So we're actually going to start with this by copying and pasting these two ramp operators from before. We're going to reuse these and modify them slightly so that we have a useful pattern generator for us. So within these two operators. We're going to set our period to 0.5. Make sure you have them both selected. If you don't, and then we'll set our extend left mode to mirror, and that'll give us that kind of a texture. And then we'll finally finish up here by setting interpolate notches to ease in, ease out, and that gives us the ramp textures that we're looking for. We're going to attach those ramps to noise tops so that we can get a kind of horizontal and vertical image with a variety of different values. So I'm going to go ahead and connect this first ramp to the second input of a noise top, and then we'll copy and paste that noise top and connect the second ramp to the second input of that noise number 2. We'll select both of those and start making some changes to the parameters now. First of all, we might as well set our output resolution based on that constant chops. We'll do that chop reference again. And our pixel format should once again be 32-bit float mono. We'll set our input and viewer smoothness to nearest pixel here. It's not really necessary, but I'm just doing it kind of as a precaution for later on. And then we'll set our period to 11. And you should see the same sort of pattern that I am getting on screen now. Then we can hook those up to limit chops, or tops rather, to actually quantize the values that are within the image to give us more discrete bands instead of these kind of smooth banding visuals that we're getting right now. So grab a limit and attach one to each one of those horizontal and vertical channels, and then we'll come to the quantize page and turn that quantized value to floor. And you can already see we have some nice discrete bands ready to roll, but we're actually going to set this value step parameter up to 0.25, and that'll give us what you should see, or you should be seeing rather, what I have on screen now. We're going to attach those to a reorder chop to get, gosh, I keep saying chop, reorder top to get ourselves some color channels. We'll attach the first one to the first input and the second one to the second input. And then we'll do some similar but not exactly the same parameter changes to this. Let's set our output green input to input number 2. And then we're actually going to set the channels that they're looking for to luminance for both of those. And we can set our blue again to 0, but it doesn't really matter in this case. And then we'll come to the common page here and set our pixel format not to 32-bit float RGBA, but 32-bit float RG, because we only need red and green for our displacement. We don't need any of the other color, or blue rather, or alpha channels in this case. And we can set to nearest pixel if we want to. It doesn't really make that much of a difference. Then we'll attach a math top, and we'll make some slight changes to the range here. We'll set our 2 range to 0.3 to 0.7, and you'll see it's kind of reduced that the values within the image, and we'll set our multiply value to 1.1 to brighten it up just slightly. And that's actually everything that we're going to do within that part of the network. We can now connect that to our displace top. Now, we had keyboard control in the original over the kind of displacement that was happening in the image and the slicing that was going on. And we're actually going to set that up first before we kind of conclude the feedback loop. So I achieved this via the keyboard in chop. You could, of course, use a MIDI controller or anything else you want. We're going to set up our keyboard in chop up here, and we're going to pull in the 2, 3, and 4 keys because we're already using the 1 key for the feedback loop. And then we're going to split it out into branches, and the first branch is going to be for the 2 key, which was used to change the horizontal or vertical displacement that was being applied. So basically allowing us to slice horizontally or vertically. So we're going to set our, we're going to grab a select chop first of all, and then we're going to grab the K2 channel so we can work on that one independently. We'll then attach a logic chop to that. And we're going to set our channel preoperator to toggle. That'll let us toggle that on and off nicely, which is great. And then we'll attach a null. And we'll call this one mode, just because that's allowing us to switch between those different displacement options. And we're actually going to use a chop execute that in order to accomplish this functionality. So we are going to write a little bit of Python here, but don't worry, it's all been done for you. Not the chop to, but the chop execute is what we want. Let's start off by dragging our mode operator onto the chops parameter. And then we're actually not going to use the value change mode, but we are going to use the off to on and on to off modes for this particular operator. So then we'll open it up in a external text editor just so that we can see this a little bit more clearly. And I'll pause the video here and display the text at an even larger scale so that it's easier for you to copy down. Assuming you've got all this code entered in, what's basically happening here is we're using that toggle switch to change which channels are being pulled in for the vertical and horizontal source within this displace. That's really all it's doing. So now that that's been set up, make sure if you had it in an external text editor, you save. If I hit the 2 key, we should see some changes happening within our displace top, and indeed we are. So that's perfect. We can continue on with our other keyboard controls here. Let's go ahead and grab a second select, and this time we'll grab the number 3 key, which is the K3 channel. This one is going to be hooked up to a logic chop as well. And again, we're going to do the same thing where we set the channel preoperator to toggle. And then in this case, we're actually going to set, or add rather, a math chop after that. And in our range page here, we're just going to set the to range, the upper value to 0.01. And then we'll attach a null to the end and call this one displace space weight. So what this is going to do is allow us to turn on and off the displacement that is happening by making a chop reference from this displace chop to the displace weight parameter. What's going to happen is that will allow us to basically stop the movement and kind of pause our chopped, sliced up image at any point and, kind of view or do whatever we want with that composition. So again, just make that chop reference from the displace weight chop to the displace weight parameter within the displace top. After that, we're going to do our final kind of keyboard control component of this network with the 4 key. And again, we're going to need a select chop here, and we're going to set our channel names to K4, which is the 4 key, and then we'll attach a null. We don't have to do anything else, and we'll call this one seed. So what this one is going to do is it's going to apply random seed values to both of these noise tops that are down here, and also phase values to these ramps, so that the different patterns that generate the slices within this feedback loop will be able to be randomly sort of generated over and over and over again, which allows you to get, as I was saying in the intro, some variety to the way that those things are being sliced up. So we're going to do this again via a chop execute, and I'll grab that right now. Make sure that you drag the seed operator into the chops parameter, and then we're going to turn off value change, and all we're going to do here is turn on the off to on switch, and then we can edit the code. Once again, I'm going to pause the video and show this at a larger scale so that you can copy it down, and then we will reconvene and take a look at what it's doing. So assuming that you've got all this code entered in, I really want to stress that you need this import random call. We need this random library in order to be able to assign those random values to the seed and the phase parameters. But assuming that that's all been entered in correctly, we'll just go ahead and save that and then come back here. And if I hit the 4 key, we should be able to see some changes within those operators. And you can see those are being changed. And really what we should be looking at here is this part, because that's what generates the patterns that are used for that slicing. So that is actually it for our control based on the keyboard input. So we can actually start our feedback loop working, and we should be able to see our UV texture getting that kind of slicing effect applied to it. So to start this off, we need to change or add a target top to our feedback top. So we're going to drag our displace top into that target top parameter, and then within the displace top, we need to make a couple of modifications. We're going to change this extend mode to repeat. And then on the common page, we're going to set our input smoothness and our viewer smoothness to nearest pixel. And once we've done that, I've got the displace weight off, so that means nothing's going to happen. But if I hit the 3 key on my keyboard, you can see that we're getting that kind of slicing effect applied to this UV. So for all intents and purposes, we've actually completed the effect itself. We just need to take this sort of control channel and apply it to one of our textures. So before we add a texture in here to actually apply this effect to, I want to come back to the math top here because I forgot to have us set the input smoothness to nearest pixel and the viewer smoothness to nearest pixel. I don't really know if this is going to make all that much of a difference in the output, but I just want to make sure that our slices have the kind of sharpest, most defined edges that they can have. After that, we can actually go ahead and bring in a texture. And I will do this with a noise top in this case. However, feel free to insert whatever operator or chain of operators you want here. It doesn't really matter. First thing I'm going to do with this noise top is come to the common page and make a chop reference from our resolution constant, get that 1280 by 1280 resolution, and then we'll set the pixel format here to 32-bit float. Then we can come back to the noise parameter page and set our period to something like 9 or 10, and then we'll turn the monochrome switch off, and I might as well just toss a different seed in here. And then the final thing that we have to do to actually apply what will be our sliced up UV texture and have that actually make the effect function on our noise texture is to use a remap. And the remap top basically takes an input, a UV image input, takes the red and the green channels, and that allows us to warp the original texture that's connected to the first input. So what that means is once you connect the noise to the first input and the UV to the second, and we toss a null in here and turn on that display, that we should be, by hitting the 3 key, able to start slicing up our image. And you can see there that that's working totally fine. So that's actually it for this effect. So now you could take this and start running whatever kind of texture you want into this first input. I'd recommend, if you're going to start messing with movie files or other things like that, to have like a fit top so that you can make sure to match that 1280 by 1280 resolution or whatever resolution you ended up going with. But before we close out the video, I just wanted to give like a brief rundown of what exactly is going on with this network. Now that we've built it, we can kind of take it apart and just look at a couple of brief things about why it's working and what it's doing. So now that we've finished this up, you're probably wondering how the heck this actually works. So we take this UV texture, we run it into a feedback loop, and we displace it based on these patterns that we generate down here. Our displace top is set to the repeat mode, and that's what allows for these textures to loop around the screen and not sort of create a different kind of pattern. Our chop network up here controls a variety of things, but importantly, it actually changes the horizontal and vertical source settings within this displace top so that only vertical or horizontal displacement is happening at any given time. It's never got both vertical and horizontal displacement, and that's what allows it to loop in one direction or the other. Our patterns are set up so that they allow this kind of clean looping in either one of those directions. That's why they have this vertical or horizontal kind of alignment to them. And then we've used this reorder here to create 2 color channels, red and green, so that when we are displacing in that particular direction that we want, we are only ever pulling the texture basically that corresponds with that kind of displacement. So it's all about this kind of like specific displacement image texture generation here, this pattern, and then that repeat mode within the displace top itself. And then finally, one thing I forgot to mention is the nearest pixel setting is actually super important within this displace. That is what keeps these texture, or the edges at least, that are generated by this displacement super sharp and doesn't cause a kind of degrading and blurring effect happening over time, because this is within a feedback loop. So it's a combination of all 3 of those things that actually generates that. So that's just a quick rundown of how this thing actually functions. So we're going to wrap up this video with a quick plug section. You've been watching this 2D texture slicing TouchDesigner tutorial, tongue twister of a title, on the Interactive and Immersive HQ YouTube page, which if you're not familiar with already has a ton of great TouchDesigner and other interactive technology related videos. They've got great stuff like tutorials, interviews, conversations, stuff like that. So make sure that you hit that subscribe button below to keep up with their latest content. I also wanted to give the Interactive and Immersive HQ and Elbers a huge shout out and thank you for allowing me to guest host this video on their channel. It's been a ton of fun putting this together, and I hope you guys really enjoy this tutorial. I wanted to follow that up by giving the Interactive and Immersive HQ Pro a short plug. As a current member, it's really helped me to level up my own TouchDesigner skill set. I would definitely recommend it to anyone of any skill set with TouchDesigner, really. I've not been paid to say this or anything like that. I've just had a really great learning experience using the tools and assets that they have put together. So finally, I just wanted to finish off by saying that I'm your host, Jack DiLaura. You can find me here on YouTube at the channel name Jack DiLaura, which you can search above or click the link in the description below. I do TouchDesigner tutorials in the series Another TouchDesigner Tutorial. You can also find me on Instagram at Jack DiLaura, which is also appearing on screen now. I post experiments and potential content for future videos and stuff like that on there. So if you want to keep up with me on a day-to-day basis, you can go ahead and follow me there. And with that, I would like to just say thank you so much for watching. I'm looking forward to seeing you in the next video.
Hey guys, thanks for watching. If you're serious about taking your TouchDesigner and interactive skills to the next level, I highly recommend you check out the Interactive and Immersive HQ Pro. It's the only educational resource and community of its kind for TouchDesigner and interactive professionals. You can learn more by checking out the link in the description. And if you like this video, don't forget to hit that like button. And if you're new here, don't forget to hit subscribe and the little bell icon for more awesome free content.